The day started like any other, with the simplicity of routine. Coffee brewed strong, the morning paper slightly damp from the dew, and the low hum of the news on the TV. It was a Wednesday, and the familiarity of the midweek hustle felt comforting. Yet, as I sat down to tie my shoes, the phone rang, slicing through the quiet of the morning with an urgency that knotted my stomach. It was Michael, my oldest. His voice, usually calm and collected, carried a tremor that set my heart racing. "Dad, it's me. I'm at the hospital. They think it's my kidneys," he stammered out. The words were heavy, laden with fear. "Which hospital?" "I'm coming right now," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. At the hospital, the sterile smell of antiseptic and the soft shuffle of nurses' shoes filled the space around me as I paced the waiting area. When the doctor finally approached, her face was somber. "Mr. Thompson, your son is stable for now, but he may need a transplant if his condition doesn't improve." "A transplant?" I echoed, my mind reeling. "Isn't there anything else you can do?" She suggested a family donor might be necessary and recommended we all get tested for compatibility. I agreed without hesitation, imagining myself as the hero who could save his son. The decision felt right, parental even. Later, as I sat in the lab, the cold vinyl of the chair clinging to my skin, I felt a flicker of hope. The nurse, a young woman with gentle eyes, tried to offer a smile as she drew my blood. "It'll be quick, Mr. Thompson," she assured me. But nothing prepared me for the call the next day. The voice of Dr. Harper was clinical, detached as she uttered the words that would dismantle my world. "Mr. Thompson, the results are in. I'm afraid you're not a match for Michael. In fact, the tests reveal you are not his biological father." The room spun. "That's impossible," I said, my voice a mix of anger and disbelief. "Run the tests again." "We've double-checked, Mr. Thompson. I'm truly sorry." I hung up, the weight of the revelation pinning me to the spot. When I finally made it home, Carolyn was in the kitchen, humming to herself as she cooked dinner. The normalcy of the scene was surreal. "Carolyn," I started, my voice cracking as the words tumbled out. "The hospital called. The tests, I'm not Michael's father." She dropped a spoon she had been holding, and it clattered loudly on the tile floor. Turning to face me, her face pale, her eyes wide with something I couldn't read. "Sean, Her voice trailed off, and she looked away, gathering her thoughts. "We need to talk, Carolyn. Now." My demand was firm, brooking no delay. She nodded slowly, wiping her hands on her apron as she led the way to the living room. We sat on opposite ends of the couch, the distance between us feeling like miles. "Sean, I never wanted you to find out this way." Her voice was a whisper, laden with years of unspoken truths. "Start talking, Carolyn. There's nothing to protect me from now." My tone was bitter, the hurt evident. The conversation that night was long and painful, filled with admissions of past mistakes and secrets that had lurked beneath the surface of our marriage for too long. As she spoke of her affair with Harvey, our close friend, the foundation of what I believed was my life crumbled into dust. This chapter sets the tone for the entire novel, portraying Sean's initial shock and the dramatic shift in his family life, marking the beginning of a deeply personal and transformative journey. The evening air was stifling as I sat across from Carolyn in our dimly lit living room. The shadows cast by the flickering candle on the coffee table seemed to dance with the tension between us. I had barely moved since I sank into the armchair, my mind racing, replaying Dr. Harper's words and Carolyn's reluctant confirmation of her affair. "Carolyn," I started, my voice strained with a mix of emotions. How long has this lie lived between us?" She clasped her hands together, knuckles white, avoiding my gaze. It started nearly 30 years ago, Sean. It wasn't supposed to last." 30 years? I repeated, voice rising with incredulity. "And Michael and who else? Are any of the children mine?" The last question hung heavily in the air, a dreaded thought I hadn't allowed myself to fully consider until now. Carolyn finally met my eyes, tears starting to form. It was only Michael at first, but then there was Lucy. She's also Harvey's. Her voice broke on the last word. I stood abruptly, the chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. Half of our children aren't mine. How could you, Carolyn? How could you do this to our family? I thought I was doing the right thing by staying silent. I convinced myself that it didn't matter because you loved them as your own. Her voice was desperate, pleading for understanding. Loved? I still love them. They're my children, no matter what. But you... I don't know if I can ever forgive this betrayal. My statement was cold, harsher than I intended, but the pain was raw, cutting deep. I know I've wronged you. More than words can ever fix, Carolyn whispered, wiping away a tear that slipped down her cheek. If I could take it all back, change everything, I would do it in a heartbeat. And Harvey? I asked, the name tasting bitter. Does he know? Do they know? He knows, but the kids... They have no idea. Harvey and I ended things shortly after Lucy was born. It was all too much, too wrong. We decided it would be best if he stepped back completely. Her explanation was tangled with regret and sorrow. I paced the room, each step heavy with the weight of the revelation. You chose to live a lie, Carolyn, and in doing so, you chose for all of us. I stopped, facing her, the hurt evident in my expression. I need to think. I need space to figure out what comes next. Carolyn nodded, her face pale and drawn. I understand. I'll do whatever you need. I just hope, in time, you might find it in your heart to forgive me. I left the room without another word, the echo of my footsteps a stark contrast to the storm of emotions raging within me. As I closed the door to our bedroom, the finality of the moment sank in. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Nothing would ever be the same again. This chapter deepens the emotional conflict introduced in Chapter 1, exploring the profound impact of betrayal and the complexities of forgiveness. The dialogues aim to convey the raw, unfiltered emotions of the characters, setting the stage for the challenges and transformations that will define their paths forward in the narrative. The morning after our confrontation felt surreal. The house, once filled with the comforting sounds of a bustling family, was now shrouded in an oppressive silence. As I made coffee, the mundane act felt disconnected from the chaos of my emotions. Carolyn had stayed in the guest room, a physical manifestation of the gulf that had opened between us. Michael called early in the morning, his voice cautious. Dad, how are you holding up? I heard you and Mom talking last night. I sighed, leaning against the kitchen counter. It's a lot to process, son. I'm not sure what to feel right now. Dad, whatever you need, I'm here. We all are, Michael offered, his voice steady but concerned. Thanks, Mike. We'll talk soon. I need some time to think about how we'll handle this, with everyone. After hanging up, the day dragged on with aching slowness. I decided to take a walk, needing the fresh air to clear my head. As I wandered through the neighborhood, the familiar paths provided no comfort. Each step was a reminder of a life that felt like a lie. When I returned, Lucy, my daughter, was waiting on the porch. Her expression was a mix of concern and confusion. Dad, Mom won't tell me what's wrong. She's just been crying. What happened? Lucy's questions pierced the last defenses of my resolve. I motioned for her to sit beside me on the swing. Lucy, there's something you should know about our family. It's going to be hard to hear, but I believe you deserve the truth. Lucy nodded, bracing herself. Your mother had an affair with Harvey a long time ago. It didn't just happen once. It was an ongoing thing. Michael and you're Harvey's children. The words felt alien, even as they left my lips. Lucy's face crumpled, tears welling up in her eyes. Dad, are you saying you're not my dad? I'm saying I didn't father you, but Lucy, I am your dad in every way that counts. I've loved you from the moment you were born, and that hasn't changed. She leaned into me, sobbing. I don't understand why Mom would do this. It doesn't make sense. I know, sweetheart. I'm struggling to understand it all myself, I admitted, feeling her pain as acutely as my own. The rest of the day was a blur of hushed phone calls and whispered conversations. Carolyn avoided me, but the need to decide our future pressed heavily on us both. That evening, we sat at the dinner table, the three of us, Carolyn, Lucy, and myself. The empty chairs where Michael and our youngest, Sophie, usually sat made the room feel even colder. Sean, I've been thinking a lot about what you said, Carolyn began, breaking the silence. Maybe it would be best if I left for a while. Give you space to heal. Lucy's fork clattered to her plate. You can't leave, Mom. We need to figure this out together. Isn't there a way to fix this? Carolyn looked at me, her eyes searching for an answer I wasn't sure I had. I don't know if it can be fixed, Lucy, but I know your dad and I need some time to understand what this means for us, for our family. The discussion went late into the night, each of us grappling with our thoughts and emotions. No clear resolutions emerged, only the painful acknowledgement that the path ahead would be fraught with challenges. This chapter exposes the initial individual and collective reactions to the family's upheaval. Dialogues are designed to reflect the shock, confusion, and attempts at processing the complex web of feelings and decisions facing each family member. The quiet hours of the early morning found me in the dim light of my study, surrounded by the familiar comfort of books and memorabilia, a stark contrast to the tumult in my heart. I had always considered this room my sanctuary, a place where I could think and reflect. Now it served as a retreat from the emotional storm raging just beyond its doors. As I sat there, an old photograph of Carolyn, Michael, Lucy, and Sophie caught my eye. It was taken on a summer day at the beach, all smiles and sunshine. It seemed like a lifetime ago. I picked it up, the edges of the photo cool and smooth against my fingertips. Was any of it real? I whispered into the silence. The door creaked softly, and I looked up to see Lucy standing hesitantly at the threshold. Dad, can we talk? Her voice was low, almost lost in the spacious room. Of course, Lucy. Come in. I gestured to the chair across from me. She walked over slowly and sat down, her posture rigid with tension. I've been thinking about what you said, about not being my biological father, and I realized that it doesn't matter to me. You're my dad. You've always been my dad. Her words were a balm to my raw emotions. Thank you, Lucy. That means more to me than you can know. I paused, taking a deep breath. How are you holding up? It's hard. I feel betrayed, not just by Mom, but by everything I thought was true about our family. She looked down, twisting her hands in her lap. I understand. I feel that way too, I admitted, feeling the weight of her shared pain. But we'll get through this together. We're still a family. Lucy nodded slowly, a tentative smile breaking through her uncertainty. I'd like that. The conversation with Lucy set the tone for the days that followed. I spent a lot of time in reflection, weighing the full impact of Carolyn's deceit against the years of love and shared memories. The balance was difficult to strike. There were moments of profound sadness and loss, interspersed with flashes of anger and betrayal. Yet through it all, my love for my children remained unshaken. Carolyn and I began to talk more, initially through closed doors and eventually face-to-face. These conversations were often strained but necessary. Sean, I'm so sorry for the pain I've caused, Carolyn said during one of our discussions, her voice choked with emotion. I was selfish, and I've hurt you and the kids more than I could have imagined. I appreciate your apology, Carolyn, but I need time to forgive. I'm not there yet, I responded, the honesty in my voice clear and unwavering. I understand. Take all the time you need. I'll do whatever it takes to make things right, if that's even possible, she replied, a tear escaping down her cheek. It was during these days of deep introspection and tentative dialogues that I came to a resolution. I would not allow the betrayal to define the rest of my life or the lives of my children. We needed to rebuild, perhaps differently, but with hope for the future. I decided to start with individual counseling and proposed family therapy as the next step. We need to heal, and we need help to do it. Are you willing to try? I asked Carolyn and the kids. They agreed, each of them committed to working through the hurt and finding a way forward. This chapter would delve into the emotional and psychological processes Sean undergoes, showcasing his journey from betrayal to the beginnings of healing. It highlights the importance of family bonds, even those tested by profound challenges, and sets a foundation for potential reconciliation and rebuilding. As autumn arrived, bringing with it the chill that foreshadowed the coming winter, our family found itself in a delicate balance of healing and pain. The family therapy sessions were hard but necessary, dredging up hidden feelings and fostering difficult conversations. We were learning to navigate the fragile pathways of forgiveness and acceptance, one step at a time. One evening, as I sat in my study reading, the phone rang with a suddenness that startled me. It was late, the kind of hour when a call meant either a wrong number or bad news. Bracing myself, I answered. "Hello? Mr. Thompson?" The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, hesitant. "This is Officer Daniels from the State Police. There's been an accident." The words hit me like a physical blow. What kind of accident? Is it Carolyn? My voice was tight with fear. "Yes, sir. I'm afraid it's serious. She was driving on the interstate when her car veered off the road and down an embankment." "Is she—" I couldn't finish the question, my throat tight with the unspeakable thought. "She's been taken to the hospital, but it's critical, sir. You should come right away." I barely remembered hanging up the phone or driving to the hospital. My mind was a whirlwind of dread and desperation, praying for a chance to fix things that might now never be mended. At the hospital, the harsh fluorescent lights of the emergency room were a stark contrast to the darkness outside. I found Michael and Lucy already there, their faces pale and drawn. "Dad, how bad is it?" Michael's voice was steady, but his eyes were wide with fear. "They haven't told me anything yet," I replied, trying to maintain composure for their sakes. We didn't have to wait long before a doctor approached us, her expression somber. "Are you Mr. Thompson?" "Yes. How is she? Can we see her?" My voice was urgent, desperate for any shred of hope. "I'm sorry, Mr. Thompson," the doctor began, and the rest of her words fell on me like a weight. "We did everything we could, but her injuries were too severe. I'm afraid she didn't make it." The room seemed to spin as her words sank in. "Didn't make it, but you had to save her." My protest was weak, futile against the finality of the doctor's statement. Lucy burst into tears and I pulled her into a hug, my own shock numbing me to the core. Michael stood beside us, his hand on my shoulder, his presence a silent strength. As the initial shock wore off, the reality set in, and with it, a torrent of grief and unresolved feelings. Carolyn's death closed the door on any possibility of reconciliation or answers. We were left with the broken pieces of our family, now further shattered by tragedy. Later we gathered in the waiting room, a somber trio bound by shared loss. "What are we going to do now?" Lucy's voice was small, lost. "We'll get through this together," I said, the words as much a promise to myself as to them. "We have to." The days that followed were a blur of funeral arrangements, condolences, and the oppressive weight of grief. At the funeral, I stood by Carolyn's casket, grappling with a tumult of emotions, loss, regret, and the painful acknowledgement that despite everything, I had loved her deeply. As people filed past, offering their sympathies, I realized how much of our life together was now a memory, colored by both the love we shared and the secrets that divided us. "She loved you, you know," Michael said quietly as he joined me by the casket. "I know," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. "And I loved her too, in spite of everything." Carolyn's death marked a tragic end to a chapter in our lives, but it also underscored the importance of the bonds we still had. As we faced the future, the task ahead was clear: to heal, to forgive, and to rebuild, not just as a family, but as individuals forever changed by love and loss. The weeks following Carolyn's funeral were enveloped in a quiet melancholy that settled over the house like a thick fog. Each of us coped in our own way. Lucy threw herself into her studies, Michael increased his hours at work, and I found solace in the solitude of long walks and the now quiet corners of our home. The presence of absence was palpable. Every room whispered memories of a life that was once full, but now felt incomplete. One chilly evening, as the last of the autumn leaves clung desperately to the trees, Michael stopped by my study, leaning against the doorframe with a look that suggested he needed to talk. "Dad, I've been thinking," he began, his voice hesitant. "We can't keep going on like this. It's like we're all stuck in our own worlds of grief." I nodded, setting aside the book I hadn't really been reading. "I know, son. It's been hard on all of us. Maybe we need something new, something to bring us together. Have you thought about that trip to Europe Mom always wanted? Maybe it's time we did that. Just the three of us." Michael's suggestion hung in the air, a beacon of change in the persistent gloom. "That's a good idea," I replied, feeling a flicker of hope at the thought of doing something Carolyn had dreamed of. A change of scenery might do us good, help us find a new perspective. "I'll talk to Lucy about it tonight," Michael said, a small smile breaking through his solemn demeanor. True to his word, Michael discussed the idea with Lucy, and when I met her in the kitchen the next morning, she was more animated than I'd seen her in weeks. "Dad, Michael told me about the trip. I think it's a great idea. It could be a way to honor Mom, to do something she always wanted." Her eyes were brighter, her voice carrying a hint of excitement. "We'll make it a celebration of her life," I said, embracing the plan and her newfound enthusiasm. "We'll visit all the places she talked about: Paris, Rome, Barcelona." Planning the trip became a project that brought us together in a way nothing else had since Carolyn's passing. We pored over travel books and websites, plotted our route, and shared ideas over dinner, rediscovering the joy of conversation and shared goals. The day we left for Europe was crisp and clear, an autumn chill in the air but warmth in our hearts. As we stood in the airport, ready to embark on this journey, I felt a profound sense of togetherness. "Here's to new beginnings," I toasted, lifting my coffee cup as we sat in the departure lounge. "To Mom, and to finding peace," Lucy added, her smile tinged with nostalgia yet hopeful. "And to us being together," Michael concluded, his arm around Lucy's shoulders. The trip itself was more healing than I could have anticipated. Each city brought new sights and experiences, and more importantly, it brought us closer. We laughed more than we had in months, shared stories about Carolyn, and allowed ourselves to revel in the joy of exploration and the comfort of each other's company. Upon our return, the house no longer seemed as empty as before. Instead, it felt like a place where new memories could be made, where the past was respected, but the future still held promise. One evening, as we sat in the living room sharing photos from the trip, Lucy looked around and sighed contentedly. "I'm really glad we did this. It feels like we can start to move forward now." "Me too," I agreed, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. "We have a lot to look forward to." "Yes, we do, and I think we should keep this tradition. Maybe a trip every year?" Michael suggested, already looking forward to our next adventure. "Let's do it," I said, and we all nodded, the idea sealing our commitment to each other and to continuing to rebuild our lives, together. This chapter not only portrays the slow healing process, but also underlines the importance of creating new memories to mend the wounds of the past. Through dialogue and shared experiences, it illustrates how the characters find their way back to each other, forming a resilient bond that promises to endure through the changes and challenges ahead. Months had passed since our return from Europe, and the warm glow of our shared experiences continued to light our path forward. Winter had given way to the gentle blossoms of spring, symbolizing new beginnings, not just in nature, but in our hearts and home as well. One sunny Saturday morning, as I was pruning the roses in our garden, a hobby that Carolyn had loved and I had taken up in her memory, Lucy joined me holding 2 cups of tea. Handing me one, she settled onto the garden bench. "Dad, I've been thinking about everything we've gone through," she started, her voice thoughtful as she watched a butterfly flit among the flowers. "And I realize how much you've done for us, holding everything together when it felt like our family might just fall apart." I took a sip of the tea, appreciating its warmth. "I did what any father would do. We're family. That's what we do for each other." Lucy nodded, her eyes reflecting a depth of understanding that seemed beyond her years. "I know, but not everyone would have handled it with such grace. You chose to forgive, or at least to move forward, even with everything that happened. It wasn't easy, Lucy, but we can't live in the past. Your mother made mistakes, but she loved us, loved you kids deeply. I think finding a way to accept that was key to moving on." Lucy sighed, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "I want to help keep us moving forward. I've been offered a summer internship in New York. It's a big step for my career, but I've been hesitant to leave, considering everything." I turned to her, surprised yet proud. "Lucy, that's wonderful news. You should definitely take it. We'll be fine here, and it's not like New York is that far. We can visit any time." "Are you sure, Dad? I don't want to leave you alone," she said, concern knitting her brows. "I'm not alone. I've got Michael, and he's not far away. Plus, I think it's time I looked into doing some things I've put off for myself, too." I gave her a reassuring smile. Lucy relaxed, smiling back. "Okay, if you're sure. I guess I just needed to hear that it was okay." "It's more than okay. It's important. Go and chase your dreams, Lucy. That's what life is all about." Encouraged by our conversation, I began to consider my own future endeavors. The house felt larger with one less person, and slowly, the idea of turning part of it into a bed and breakfast, a plan Carolyn and I had mused over years ago, began to take shape in my mind. Later that week, I sat down with Michael to discuss my thoughts. We met at the local diner, a place filled with memories of family dinners and casual Sunday brunches. "Michael, I've been thinking about the house, about making some changes," I began, watching his reaction. "Changes? Like what?" His interest was piqued, his fork pausing midway to his mouth. "I'm considering turning part of it into a bed and breakfast. It's something your mom and I thought about before. And, well, I think it might be a good way to start a new chapter." Michael set down his fork, his expression thoughtful. "That sounds like a great idea, Dad. It would keep you busy, and I think Mom would have liked that." "Do you think so?" "I worry it might be too much to handle alone," I admitted, feeling a twinge of doubt. "Dad, you won't be alone. Lucy and I, we're just a phone call away. Plus, you can always hire someone to help if it gets too much." "Maybe you're right. It's about time I did something new, something for myself," I said, feeling a resolve building within me. "Exactly, and you'll be great at it. Let me know how I can help, okay? Whether it's setting things up or just being there to talk through ideas," Michael offered, his support unwavering. "Thanks, Michael, that means a lot." The rest of our meal passed with us discussing potential ideas for the bed and breakfast, each suggestion sparking new excitement and possibilities. This chapter would delve into how each family member, in finding their own paths, contributes to a collective understanding and mutual support, highlighting the enduring strength of their familial bonds. Through dialogue and personal growth, it portrays a family emerging stronger and more united from their trials, ready to embrace both individual aspirations and shared dreams. As spring deepened into a lush summer, the Thompson house buzzed with new energy. The decision to transform part of our home into a bed and breakfast had not only given me a new project, but also a renewed sense of purpose. I often found myself in the midst of renovation plans, choosing fabrics and deciding on room themes, each decision a step towards a future I hadn't envisioned until recently. One afternoon, as I was reviewing paint swatches in the future main guest room, Michael dropped by, his arms laden with brochures and a bright grin on his face. "Hey, Dad, I brought some ideas for the garden. How about a small herb garden for guests? Maybe some lavender for the walkway?" Michael spread the brochures across the table, his enthusiasm infectious. "That sounds fantastic, Michael. Lavender would make the walkway smell amazing, and fresh herbs for breakfast dishes? Perfect," I replied, genuinely excited by his contributions. "Yeah, I thought you'd like that. It's going to be incredible, Dad. Mom would have loved to see this." Michael's voice softened with the mention of Carolyn, a blend of nostalgia and pride in his eyes. "I think so too. It's like a part of her is still with us, inspiring this new beginning," I said, feeling a warm sense of connection to Carolyn in our shared endeavor, even in her absence. With renovations underway, Lucy, now interning in New York, called frequently, her voice always eager to hear about our progress. During one of our weekly video calls, she bubbled with excitement. "Dad, I showed my colleagues the website for the B&B. They're all impressed, and guess what? A couple of them are planning a trip as soon as you open." "That's wonderful to hear, Lucy. It gives me even more motivation to get everything ready. How's the city treating you?" I leaned back in my chair, always eager to hear about her adventures. "It's amazing here, Dad. Busy, but I'm learning so much. And knowing I have your support makes all the difference," she said, her smile beaming through the screen. "As always, Lucy. I'm just a call away, anytime you need me." As summer waned and the opening of the B&B approached, our family gathered for a small celebration. It was a soft launch, just for us and a few close friends. The evening was mild, with a gentle breeze that whispered through the freshly hung curtains. Raising a glass, I addressed our small crowd. "To new beginnings, and to a home that continues to bring us together. Thank you, everyone, for your support." "To Dad, who made all of this possible," Michael added, raising his glass in return. "And to Mom, whose spirit is undoubtedly filling these rooms with love," Lucy chimed in, her voice thick with emotion. The bed and breakfast opened to the public shortly after, and the response was overwhelmingly positive. Guests appreciated the cozy, welcoming atmosphere and the personal touches that made each stay special. Life had settled into a comfortable rhythm by the time autumn rolled back around. One evening, sitting on the porch watching the sunset, Michael and I shared a quiet moment. "Looking forward, huh?" Michael mused, a contented sigh escaping him. "Looking forward," I confirmed, feeling a peace I hadn't known in years. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" "We really have, Dad, and there's so much more to come." This chapter encapsulates the theme of renewal and progress, showing how the family, though forever changed by past events, finds strength and joy in new ventures and ongoing support for each other. The dialogues highlight their enduring bond, their shared memories of Carolyn, and their collective hope for the future, emphasizing resilience and the healing power of love and new endeavors. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. If today's story resonated with you, or if you've experienced similar challenges in your relationships, remember you're not alone. We hope this video offers some insight or comfort as you navigate your own path forward. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. We value your perspectives and would love to hear your stories too. Join us next time for another profound exploration of the heart's resilience. Until then, take care and keep seeking your truth.